The sharp crack of my father's palms striking my face echoed off the vaulted marble ceiling, freezing 200 high society guests in stunned silence. My mother didn't even check if I was hurt. She leaned close and hissed that I needed to sneak out through the kitchen before I ruined her luxury birthday gala. Before my father's security guards could haul me into the alley, Governor Jonathan Hayes stood up from the head table and demanded to know if anyone in the room actually knew who I was. My name is Diana Kraft. To understand how a public assault inside the Grand Hermitage Ballroom in Nashville, Tennessee, triggered the complete criminal indictment and financial collapse of my father's corporate empire, you have to look inside the cold, ruthless dynamic of the Kraft family. In our household, truth was treated as a dangerous defect, while money, political leverage, and outward appearances were worshipped above all else. My father, Richard Kraft, was the founder and CEO of Kraft Heavy Civil and Infrastructure Group, a massive commercial construction firm operating across the southeastern United States. He was a domineering, arrogant man who viewed public infrastructure projects not as community assets, but as private funding streams for his extravagant lifestyle. My mother, Eleanor, was a status-driven socialite who spent her days managing elite charitable committees and hosting lavish dinners to elevate her standing among Tennessee's political inner circles. My younger sister, Serena, was the cherished favorite. Pampered and hyper-focused on her online image, Serena was given unlimited allowance, custom vehicles, and full funding for her vanity luxury travel agency. She was taught early on that the Kraft name made her immune to consequences. I was the exact opposite. From a young age, I was fascinated by the mechanics of heavy engineering, structural load capacities in industrial material science. While Serena spent her weekends at boutique shopping centers, I studied blueprint schematics and physics textbooks. I worked relentlessly, earning a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering and a master's degree in Infrastructure Compliance Audit from Vanderbilt University, graduating at the very top of my class. The permanent rupture in our family occurred 6 years ago. Shortly after finishing my graduate degree, I accepted a position as a junior materials inspector for an independent engineering firm contracted to perform quality verification on regional highway bridges. During an audit of a major 3-lane overpass expansion over the Cumberland River, I uncovered an alarming structural defect. The primary contractor on the build was my father's company, Kraft Heavy Civil and Infrastructure. My core sample laboratory testing revealed that my father's site managers had intentionally diluted the concrete mix with unrated aggregate and reduced the structural rebar density by 28%. The structural piers supporting the overpass were dangerously compromised, incapable of carrying heavy freight traffic without risking catastrophic structural failure. I took my physical test data straight to my father's private executive suite, naive enough to believe he would be shocked and immediately halt construction to fix the issue. Instead, Richard slammed his fists onto his mahogany desk and threatened to destroy my life. "You listen to me, Diana," Richard growled, his face twisted in rage. "You do not question my concrete, and you do not threaten my contracts. You sign off on those safety stamps and seal that file, or you are completely dead to this family." When I refused to falsify the state compliance records and submitted my unedited engineering report to the State Department of Transportation, Richard reacted with nuclear fury. He disowned me on the spot, erased me from the family estate trust, and used his extensive industry influence to ensure I was blacklisted from every private engineering firm in the state.
My mother, Eleanor, called me later that night, her voice dripping with venom. "You are an ungrateful, selfish disappointment," she spat before hanging up. "Don't ever attempt to contact us or show your face at my social gatherings again." They assumed they had broken my spirit. They believed that without their wealth and backing, I would fade into obscurity. They were completely wrong. Deprived of family support, I leased a tiny studio apartment near the state capitol and applied for a civil service position with the Tennessee Office of Public Transportation Integrity and Compliance, a specialized regulatory watchdog agency created to investigate fraud, safety violations, and bid rigging in government infrastructure projects. For 6 years, I threw myself into my work. I earned my professional engineer license, mastered state procurement codes, and earned a reputation across the region for unyielding fairness, brilliant technical analysis, and absolute resistance to political coercion. By 31, I was officially appointed by the State Executive Commission as the Senior Chief Compliance Auditor for Regional Public Works. In this role, I held sole administrative oversight and statutory authority to inspect, audit, and approve or veto any public infrastructure contract exceeding $25 million, backed by state taxpayers. Meanwhile, behind the curtain of luxury, my father's company was entering a death spiral. Richard's reckless financial overextension, poor site management, and history of cutting corners on materials had finally caught up with him. Kraft Heavy Civil was buried under $85 million of high-interest institutional debt, and his primary commercial lenders had placed the company under strict operational oversight. Richard needed a massive lifeline to survive, and one presented itself: the Cumberland River Expressway and Viaduct Project, a critical, state-funded, $150 million civil works initiative. If Richard secured the contract, the massive upfront mobilization payments from the state would satisfy his creditors and keep his firm afloat. If he failed to win it, Kraft Heavy Civil would face immediate insolvency, bank seizure, and bankruptcy. To secure the contract, Richard pulled out every weapon in his arsenal. He organized a $50,000 luxury charity gala inside the Grand Hermitage Ballroom in downtown Nashville, timed specifically to coincide with my mother Eleanor's 58th birthday. Richard invited state senators, bank presidents, industrial suppliers, and the night's key guest, Governor Jonathan Hayes. Richard was convinced that by staging an opulent display of wealth and hosting the governor, he could solidify the political ties necessary to guarantee his company received the $150 million award. However, Richard was relying on an outdated playbook. He assumed government contracts were still handed out through private handshakes and backroom promises. He was completely ignorant of new state transparency laws that had stripped political figures of direct awarding power, placing total, unappealable veto authority over major infrastructure grants directly into the hands of the chief compliance auditor. And Richard had no idea who held that position. To protect my investigations from corporate lobbying, bribery attempts, or media harassment, I maintained absolute privacy regarding my personal background. On official state registry documents and public regulatory filings, my name was listed strictly under my formal title, Chief Auditor D.C. Kraft. 3 days before the gala, Governor Jonathan Hayes' office contacted my executive team. The governor requested my personal attendance at the Grand Hermitage Hotel event on Saturday evening. Because the final award selection for the Cumberland River project was slated for public release the following Monday, Governor Hayes wanted his chief compliance auditor present to personally brief him on the confidential audit dossier before he made any official statements to the press. On Saturday night, the Grand Hermitage Ballroom was a spectacle of excessive wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast warm, golden light across gilded pillars, champagne towers glinted near the main stage, and a professional chamber orchestra played softly as 200 of Tennessee's most powerful figures conversed in formal evening wear. At 8:30, I arrived at the venue. I was not dressed in a ball gown. I wore a crisp, tailored navy blue executive suit, carrying a locked leather state portfolio containing the finalized 300-page technical audit report on Kraft Heavy Civil. As I moved through the main entrance toward the elevated VIP section near the governor's table, I spotted my family standing near the center floor. My father, Richard, was holding a glass of aged bourbon, laughing loudly with a group of commercial bank executives. My mother, Eleanor, was draped in diamonds, proudly chatting beside Serena, who was live-streaming the room for her social media followers. As I passed the velvet security rope, Richard turned his head and caught sight of me. His smile instantly evaporated, replaced by an expression of pure, boiling rage. He set his glass down on a passing server's tray with a harsh clatter and stormed directly across the floor toward me, his heavy steps drawing immediate attention. "How dare you sneak in here?" Richard barked, his voice echoing sharply across the ballroom. The orchestra stumbled to a halt. Guests throughout the room turned in surprise, watching as my father aggressively pinned me against a marble column. "Father, I am here on official state business," I said evenly, maintaining a calm demeanor while clutching my portfolio. "Don't you dare call me father," Richard hissed, his face turning dark red. "How dare you sneak into your mother's private birthday gala, you miserable, pathetic brat? Did you come here to embarrass us? Did you slip past security to beg me for money in front of the governor?" Before I could utter another word, Richard raised his right hand and struck me across the face with a hard, open-palmed slap. The loud crack of his hand hitting my cheek sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. The force turned my head, and a burning sting flared across my skin, but I did not stumble. I straightened my posture, holding his gaze with absolute, icy composure. Gasps of shock rippled through the assembled crowd. My mother, Eleanor, hurried over,
her silk dress rustling loudly, but she didn't check to see if her daughter was uninjured. Instead, she glanced nervously around at the staring guests, her face contorted with embarrassment. Eleanor leaned in close to my ear, her voice shaking with bitter hatred. "Leave through the kitchen service door right now, before security throws you in the street. Don't you dare ruin my birthday." Serena stepped up beside her, smirking arrogantly. "Look at her, wearing a cheap business suit to a luxury gala. Get out, Diana! You don't belong in our class." Richard signaled aggressively to his 4 private security guards standing near the doors. "Guards, grab this trespasser by the arms, throw her out into the alley, and call the police to have her booked for criminal trespass." The guards stepped forward, reaching out to grab my arm.
Touch her, and every one of you will be placed under immediate arrest for assaulting a cabinet-level state official. A commanding, powerful voice thundered from the head table. The entire ballroom went completely motionless. Governor Jonathan Hayes stood up from his seat at the center table. Escorted by 2 uniformed state highway patrol officers, the governor walked down the carpeted stairs, his face rigid with intense authority. The security guards froze instantly, pulling their hands back and stepping away. Richard quickly adjusted his tie, forcing a sweating, nervous smile as he turned toward the governor. "Governor Hayes, I am so deeply sorry you had to witness this unfortunate family matter. This is just my estranged, unstable daughter. She snuck in to cause a scene and disturb our celebration. I am having her removed immediately." Governor Hayes stepped directly between my father and me, placing himself in front of Richard. He stared at my father with unyielding disdain before addressing the entire room of bank presidents, senators, and journalists. "Do you know who she is, Richard?" Governor Hayes asked, his voice echoing clearly off the high walls. Richard blinked, visibly thrown off balance. She's just a bitter, disowned former junior engineer." "She is Dr. Diana Kraft," Governor Hayes cut in firmly, his tone sharp and decisive. "She is the Senior Chief Compliance Auditor for the Tennessee Office of Public Transportation Integrity and Compliance. She is the highest-ranking civil infrastructure auditor in this state." A wave of shocked whispers instantly swept through the crowd. All the color drained from my father's face. His eyes widened in sheer disbelief as he looked from the governor to me. What did you just say?" My mother, Eleanor, gasped loudly, clutching her necklace as her hands began to shake violently. Serena dropped her phone, watching it bounce off to polished floor. "Governor Hayes requested my presence tonight in my official regulatory role, Mr. Kraft," I announced, my voice steady, loud, and carrying absolute authority as I stepped past my father toward the center floor. I unlocked my leather portfolio, pulled out the 300-page audit file, and placed it onto the presenter stand under the spotlight. Over the past 90 days, my state compliance task force completed an exhaustive forensic engineering and financial audit of Kraft Heavy Civil regarding their application for the $150 million Cumberland River Expressway project. Richard took a frantic step forward, his voice cracking with desperation. "Deanna, wait! We are family. You can't do this to your own father." "Silence," Governor Hayes commanded, glaring at Richard with cold disgust. "Proceed, Chief Auditor Kraft." Our physical core testing and metallurgical analyses proved that Kraft Heavy Civil systematically submitted falsified concrete strength reports, used non-compliant structural steel alloys on active bridge designs, and intentionally hid over $85 million in defaulted corporate liabilities across multiple banking institutions, I revealed, reading directly from the certified state findings. I looked my father straight in the eyes as his shoulders slumped in terror. Pursuant to the Tennessee Public Contracts Act, Title 12, Chapter 4, and statutory authority granted by the State Executive Commission, I have issued a formal, unappealable administrative order of disqualification. Kraft Heavy Civil's bid for the Cumberland River project is officially rejected. Loud gasps echoed through the room as the commercial bank executives at the main table exchanged horrified looks. "Furthermore," I added, handing a sealed blue document folder to the state patrol captain, "due to severe safety fraud, intentional document manipulation, and attempted bribery of regional inspectors, I am executing an immediate administrative debarment, prohibiting Kraft Heavy Civil from bidding on any public works projects within the state for a period of 10 years.
Richard stumbled backward, hitting the edge of a dining table as his knees buckled. 10 years? That destroys my firm. I'm ruined. You ruined yourself, Richard, the moment you decided that profit mattered more than human lives, I replied coldly. And effective immediately, a formal criminal referral for public endangerment and procurement fraud has been delivered to the state attorney general. Governor Hayes stepped up to the microphone. This event is concluded. State officers, please escort Mr. Kraft to his corporate headquarters to secure all official records. The ballroom descended into complete chaos. The bank executives who had promised to extend Richard's loans immediately stood up, revoked their credit lines on the spot, and exited the venue. My mother, Eleanor, collapsed into a chair, crying hysterically as her wealthy socialite friends turned away from her, whispering in disgust as they hurried out the doors. Serena stood frozen, realizing that her trust fund, luxury travel, and lifestyle had vanished in a single evening. Richard looked at me with tears of wild rage and defeat streaming down his face. Diana, please, look at what you've done to your mother's birthday. Look at what you've done to our family. I looked down at my father, the man who had disowned me, blacklisted me, and struck my face in front of 200 people. 6 years ago, Richard, you told me I didn't belong in your family, I said softly, my voice filled with unshakable strength. You were right. I belong to a world built on integrity, safety, and truth. And your world ends tonight. I picked up my state portfolio, turned on my heel, and walked out through the main doors of the Grand Hermitage Ballroom, my head held high, leaving the shattered remains of my family's corporate lie behind me forever. The legal and financial destruction of Kraft Heavy Civil was absolute. Within 48 hours of the gala, Richard's primary lenders declared all $85 million in debt due immediately. Unable to secure capital, the company was forced into involuntary Chapter 7 liquidation, its machinery, assets, and offices sold off at public auction. The state attorney general filed formal criminal charges against Richard Kraft for corporate fraud and reckless endangerment. Faced with irrefutable physical evidence from my audit, Richard entered a guilty plea, receiving a 7-year sentence in state prison along with massive financial restitution orders. My mother, Eleanor, lost the family mansion, her luxury vehicles, and her coveted positions on charity boards. Ostracized by Nashville society, she moved into a tiny apartment, living off a minimal personal annuity. Serena was forced to close her travel agency, sell her luxury vehicle, and take an entry-level retail job to cover her own rent and basic living expenses. Meanwhile, I continued my career as senior chief compliance auditor, establishing rigorous new safety protocols that protected thousands of commuters across the region. I built a life grounded in honor, professional authority, and total independence, a life so solidly constructed that no toxic relative could ever dismantle it. Educational lesson. This narrative illustrates key legal principles regarding state public procurement, administrative debarment, and regulatory oversight. State public procurement codes. Public construction contracts funded by taxpayers are subject to strict statutory compliance regulations. Government agencies are legally prohibited from awarding contracts to entities that submit falsified material test reports or conceal financial defaults. Administrative debarment and disqualification. Independent compliance officers possess statutory authority to issue orders of debarment against contractors who violate safety standards or engage in procurement fraud. Debarment legally disqualifies a company from bidding on government projects for a specified term, protecting public funds and safety. Independent audit mandates and criminal referrals. To eliminate political corruption, modern regulatory frameworks grant independent compliance auditors sole veto power over major infrastructure grants. When an audit uncovers criminal fraud, regulatory bodies are mandated to issue formal referrals to state prosecutors or the Attorney General. Personal advice. If you have been cast aside, disowned, or mistreated by toxic family members because you refuse to compromise your ethics to protect their greed or vanity, never lower your standards to seek their acceptance. Recognize that their hostility stems from your refusal to be manipulated. Focus your energy on mastering your profession, building undeniable competence, and creating a life anchored in unwavering integrity. When you stand firmly on truth and professional excellence, no amount of family pressure or intimidation can ever diminish your power or take away your dignity.